Hey, MCARBO brother. I'm Chris Nelson, president of MCARBO. Really excited to introduce new PMR-30 all-in-one bundle, taking your PMR-30 from average to stellar performance, reliability, and function. Really love what we were able to do here, from aluminum flat face trigger to a stainless steel feed ramp to the enhanced mag release to help shift that whole magazine higher up into the frame to assist in better feeding operations and overall function. Not to mention the extra power recoil spring to improve the cycling operations as well. The whole thing, the whole package is to give you a much more reliable, dependable PMR-30 that's much more fun to shoot without having to deal with failure to feed malfunctions over and over again. So that's something that we experienced, you guys experienced, and man, I'm really excited that we finally have all these pieces together to make this thing 100% night and day different. Also got the speed loader in this bundle as well as a few tools. Makes it really helpful and much more doable by yourself. So really excited about it. Let's get on over tabletop, show you how we did it. So in this video, we're covering the installation of the PMR-30 all-in-one bundle, and in that bundle is a stainless steel feed ramp. Fantastic part, huge upgrade for the PMR-30. The PMR-30's got a plastic feed ramp that's flat. It's got a huge little dimple in the middle. By all means, if you're gonna stick with the plastic, please just sand that little baby down. It's a little mold indentation that just happened to be in the center of the feeding area. So you're gonna need a Dremel if you wanna do the polishing. It's not 100% necessary, but man, I'm telling you, I like it. And if you got some spare time at home, especially now with all the Corona stuff going on, might as well. You can polish for 5 minutes or up to 20 minutes, entirely up to you. Includes a ½ ounce can of Flitz polish, your little microfiber towel. Really handy, great way to clean it up and even do a little hand polishing if you wanted to. You got the black nitrile 6mm gloves, and you got your 3 felt bit polishing tips. Work great in the Dremel. I've got one on here that's been used already. We'll switch it out, but these things last quite a bit of time. Then moving over to the KEL-TEC PMR-30 all-in-one bundle. So this has got everything that we offer that we think is going to make a night and day difference for your PMR-30. And that's the goal here, is try to include everything that's going to give you that wow factor, because nothing gets us more excited than when we hear you guys say, man, that is friggin' amazing. Thank you for doing this. Appreciate what you guys are doing. Help us improve our firearms and get the most performance out of them possible, and we love that, man. We've got the flat trigger for the PMR-30, CMR-30, CP-33. This one's in black, but we're also going to offer them in red. It's got your pre-travel and over-travel adjustment. Fantastic part. I mean, a 6061 aircraft grade aluminum to replace a plastic factory trigger, and then it's a nice flat trigger giving you more leverage and making it feel a little bit lighter on that trigger pull. So love this. We're going to put that in. And then our 416 stainless steel feed ramp. Love this. So you can polish this baby up to a nice shiny luster. We don't include it that way because it would drive up the cost significantly. And I figured, come on man, 5-10 minutes of your time just to polish it up the way you want it, or even 20-30 if you want to get it really blinging. So it doesn't hurt, put a little elbow grease into it, save a little money. It helps everybody out. And then the PMR-30, CP-33, CMR-30 enhanced magazine release. This is going to make it sit up higher inside the actual frame of the pistol grip. So the magazine is going to sit at that perfect level for it to feed properly. So you'll notice when we put this thing in, I'll demo it here in a second, there's about 40 thousandths worth of play between the magazine and the pistol grip. So this is going to take up a lot of that. It's going to fix that. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but the PMR-30 feed ramp will also work in the CMR, but there's some slight adjustments that got to be made to the CMR for it to work properly. Slight little sanding to a couple corners on the inside of the CMR-30, nothing major. They just happen to impede a little bit of the feeding area when you got it in the CMR-30. So we could cover that in another video. Not necessarily what we're going over here, but I figured I'd throw that in. The PMR-30 extra power recoil spring. This thing does a night and day effect by itself, just for improving the cycling operations altogether. I mean, the PMR-30, it's got some room for improvement when it comes to just improving the all-around function and reliability. There tends to be a lot of cycling issues, failure to feeds, all kinds of malfunctions that are really plagued the PMR-30 for some time. So we're excited about this. Really improving the overall cycling operations, the efficiency, improving the feeding operations by setting that magazine up higher, obviously including a stainless steel feed ramp to further improve that feeding operation, a nice flat trigger to give you more responsiveness in your trigger pull and giving you that nice little sweet spot where you can consistently pull it over and over again. Also in this kit, since we like to make it as stress-free as possible and include everything you need in one-stop shop, easy bundle, you don't need to send you around towns looking for a couple Allen keys. So here's two 2mm Allen keys. You're going to need this when we get into removing that mag release. You got to have it. If you have one, it's just going to spin and spin. You'll be there all day, cursing me, probably. Universal installation tool. This thing's really handy. So this is what we came up with here after doing a lot of the R&D and ripping a ton of these PMR-30s apart. It was like, man, how are we going to get that little spring on that feed ramp to locate inside that slide stop? Well, this is the tool right here, and you can use it for a variety of firearms. I mean, it seems like everybody here has their own little custom prison shank, as I've called it for a long time. You know, guys will take a little micro tip and just, you know, grind down a little point in there, and you could totally do that if you got an extra micro tip laying around, or you could pick this little baby up. It's cheap. It works for everything. It's great to have just in your general armorer's kit for all your guns, so makes sense. And then the PMR-30, CMR-30, CP-33 speed loader. Love this thing, really does a world of difference. You know, these high capacity mags, it helps when you're getting to that number 20, 25, 26, all the way up to 30 rounds on the PMR, CMR, or 33 rounds on the CP-33. So really does a nice job. You can see that little 45 in there with a couple more 45s. It's just to make sure you're depressing all those rounds correctly, you're getting them all in there, avoiding rim lock. It's just really a nice way to help guide the process when you're loading them mags. So really excited. Let's quit yakking. Let's get into this build. Parts needed for this build: hammer, bench block, 1/8 inch punch, 3/32 inch punch, 1/16 inch punch, little micro tip flathead screwdriver, regular tip flathead screwdriver, 2.5 millimeter Allen key or a T-handle. You don't necessarily need the T-handle. Blue 242 removable Loctite. You're also going to need two 2 millimeter Allen keys, and the universal installation tool is helpful. As always, guys, make sure we're an iPro. All right, as always, guys, let's take this opportunity together, check our firearms, make sure they're clear, check the chamber, check the bolt face, check the magazine well. This firearm's clear, we're good to go. We're also going to need an empty magazine to test that enhanced mag release, so make sure you got an empty one. And then for any rim fire, it definitely helps to have a snap cap. If you don't have a snap cap, you can use a spent casing or a round that has already been fired. Please do not use a live round. Don't want anybody to shoot their PP off. So that's the goal, is to have something that's already been shot, fired. This is an empty casing. We're going to use that to make sure we just protect our firing pin. We definitely want to prolong the life of these firearms, so it's always a good practice. All right, let's jump into it. All right, so the takedown process is pretty simple and straightforward. Just got your takedown pin right here. Going to push that out, and that's going to release the slide from the frame, and then we'll just get into removing a bunch of screws. So you can see these socket head style screws right here, all the way down. These are the 2.5 millimeter screws, and then these little button cap screws over here, there's 3 of them. All right, these are the 2 millimeter. And this guy right here will be the longest of the 2.5 millimeter socket head screws. So that'll be the only difference. All right, and we'll just try to keep all these together. This little 2.5 millimeter is shorter than the other 2. So you'll notice that when we pull it all apart, but hopefully that makes some sense and keeps it a little less confusing. So we're gonna push out that takedown pin right there. Simple. The recoil spring locates in the center of that pin just like that. So it keeps it all together. Pull that slide right off. All right, so you can see your recoil spring and guide rod here. We're going to be replacing that recoil spring here in a second. All right, we're going to do the frame first. And one problem you're going to have now that you're improving all these cycling operations and the efficiency of the firearm is now you're not going to have any of those failure to feeds or anything like that. You're going to have an issue with this buffer. Now, some of you have not melted your buffer yet, but you definitely will, especially if you love to do some mag dumps, which is always fun. Definitely these 30 round little 22 mag pistols. It's just hard not to. So we're going to have to do something with this. I'm eager to hear what you guys think of that, and we'll take a closer look at it in a minute, but these babies will melt, and I'm interested to hear if anybody's melted theirs yet. I mean, it's definitely something that we noticed in our testing. They melt pretty quick. One guy actually melted one completely out of the pistol. I still don't believe him, but it's what he said. All right, let's jump into this. So we're going to just attack it from the right side of the grip. All right, we're going to remove all these screws and then pop it off. One thing I do want to point out, which I always forget, let's go ahead and drop that hammer. You're going to make life a lot easier. Just put your finger down on it as you pull the trigger and kind of ease it forward. Drop the hammer. So that's going to keep everything intact, and it'll help you because you're going to be able to get a good look at all the internals without it exploding all over your workbench. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm removing all the 2.5 millimeters, so it'll be all of these up top, these 2, and this one here. I'm going to start with this one in the center. This is the one that's a little bit longer, and a little troubleshooting tip. So if you put all this back together and you tighten it all down real good and you have a dead trigger, well, loosen this screw right here first. If that doesn't solve it, then loosen this screw right here. If that doesn't solve it, then loosen this one. But it's really these 3 screws that can impact the trigger bar, which creates the dead trigger effect. I'm notorious for it. I like to use too much glue, and I like to over tighten things, so everybody always complains to me around here. But hey, you know, we got our little shortcomings, so I always know that I've got to go a little lighter than what I might typically do on these screws. So definitely make sure you check these 3, all right, because that's where your issue is going to be if you get a dead trigger at the end of this. All right, let's take these screws out. That's going to be your longest screw right there, right in the center. The rest of them are all going to be that length right there. All right, guys, there you go. So there's all 6 of them. You can see laid out, 1 long one, 5 shorties. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shorties, 1 long. Good to go. Now you got 2 2mm Allen keys in your Pro kit. So we're going to loosen up these 2 up here. Just leave that little guy inside that little safety lever. That's fine. Take this little guy out. This is going to be the shortest of the 2. Here's your little shorty right there. All right, now we're going to remove this last screw down here. So this is when your 2 2mm Allen keys come in handy. This is a must. If you have 1, it's just going to sit there and just spin around. You'll see how that screw is just moving as I'm turning. So we don't want that. You know, we got to lock it down and hold it. We're removing the one on the right side there, you know, same side as all the other ones we pulled out, because we're pulling that right side of the grip off. We want to leave everything else intact on the opposite side, make life a little easier for us. And you'll notice on these screws here, there's some Loctite on them. So these little 2mm screws, we're going to put Loctite on those. You don't need to put them on the 2.5mm because they've got lock nuts on the back of them. But if you want, go for it. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just these 3 right here are going to have some Loctite on them. So now we're going to go ahead and pry this baby apart. Start with your little micro tip, but just be a little careful because it can start to damage that polymer. This is plastic, so we want to make sure we're not, you know, really wedging too much with it. Once you start to get a little resistance, or you at least create enough space in there, you can use your bigger flat tip, and that's going to help protect that polymer. Definitely chewed up enough of ours, ripping them apart in a hurry. So you definitely need to take your time, be a little careful and patient with it. Don't make them like they used to. Yeah, and it'll kind of snag up down here by that mag release. That's normal. All right, so it's all coming apart. All right, so let's get a good look at it here so you can see, you know, all the internals. We're about to pull it apart. So it's nothing too complicated, nothing too crazy. I mean, we've definitely, you know, done more complicated stuff like the sub and a lot of the other KEL-TECs. So this one's pretty forgiving in most regard, at least when it comes to alignment and everything else. So that's a pretty clean disassembly right there. That's what you're shooting for. But, you know, don't get upset if this pin down here pops out and your hammer spring retracts. It's not a big deal. Just going to need a pair of needle nose pliers to pull down on that leg right there of the hammer spring and reset it right there on that pin. So if it did pop off, you know, go ahead and just pull down, reset it on that pin, and you're good to go. Hopefully that hammer was forward. If it wasn't, then it definitely popped off. That'll happen, but you learn quick. So there's that little dimple right there in that feed ramp. So it's a raised dimple too. It's not a recessed dimple. So you get a nice little spot to hit your round as it's feeding. I have no idea. But that's part of the mold making process. Sometimes you have no choice but to put it in crappy places like that. Here we go. So we're going to be replacing this mag release down here. We're going to be replacing this feed ramp and the trigger. So let's just start with this left side portion. So we're going to do the mag release and the feed ramp real quick and then jump over to the trigger. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and install the enhanced mag release. It works with the PMR-30, CMR-30, the CP-33. All right, it comes with this little assembly tool here. This is handy, and you'll see here in a second why it's important. Don't forget you got your handy little target in there. The guy did send me a picture of him shooting this thing up the other day. I felt great because it's like, man, I didn't know if anybody actually used these, so that's awesome. Might as well. All right, so here's your enhanced magazine release for the PMR-30, CMR-30, and the CP-33. What it's gonna do, it's gonna provide the necessary height adjustment to make sure that that magazine seats all the way up inside that pistol grip. So no more slop, no more 40 thousandths worth of play in that magazine. So that play in the magazine is what contributes to a lot of those failure to feeds. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna give you the appropriate alignment right here. All right, mates up perfectly. We wanna make sure we had something that was gonna tighten up those tolerances. So tolerances are a little loose. And not to mention the material. So this is a polymer as well. This is a special blend, higher strength polymer that's going to outlast the factory standard polymer. So we had to go with polymer because the magazine's polymer as well. So, you know, typically if we can do something aluminum to replace a plastic part, we're definitely going to do it. But in this case, we didn't want to jeopardize the integrity of the magazines. So this would wear your magazines if it was steel or aluminum. So we had to go with polymer. but we made sure that it was obviously a more premium polymer, and it's got some impregnated lubricity as well, so to actually improve those operations. So we want to make sure it would lock up nice and tight, and then also release nice and easy. And also you can see that recessed tab right there, so it doesn't contribute to any of those accidental mag drops that some newer shooters get, and even some more experienced shooters. Just the way this PMR-30 is kind of that bigger frame, it does tend to lead to cupping the bottom of that base a little bit, which does induce those accidental mag drops. So if you got an accidental mag drop issue, definitely going to help you here with the recessed curvature. Definitely a nice upgrade. But no, it is definitely not aluminum. I saw a few comments early on like, it's not aluminum, man. Yeah, I know, man, I'm with you. I mean, if we can replace plastic, let's do it. Let's put in some higher grade material, but we did make sure we put in a higher strength polymer, something that with some impregnated lubricity, give you some more performance advantage over the standard plastic. Let's go ahead and replace this little guy. So pretty simple and easy. We still got the factory one in here, all right? And what we want to pay attention to is the way this spring is set up in there. So we're going to replicate that exactly. So look at that long leg coming off the right side there and how it locates up in and through. See that? And you got this other leg sticking right out. So we're going to pull this guy off slowly, and then we're going to insert our little tool in there just to make sure it's a nice, easy handoff. So you're just going to kind of wiggle it off. It's under a little tension there. Try to keep it together if you can. I'm definitely going to try so I can at least show you. There we go. So it wouldn't be a very helpful video if I couldn't at least show you how it's supposed to go in there. So the goal is you can throw that little tool in there and kind of gets you a little practice and obviously shows you up close how it needs to look. So we're going to throw this spring into the enhanced mag release, and you can get a little side-by-side comparison there. You can definitely see some material differences there. You can just see how this is very low grade plastic. So we made sure we spent the extra money on the higher grade polymer. Granted, you get the idea why we had to go polymer. We don't want to tear up everybody's magazine. That would suck. We'd have to replace everybody's magazine, and we don't want to be on the hook for that. So you can see the differences right away too, you know, just comparing those features. Although they may be subtle, it's a lot of these subtle changes that add up to a big result. So, you know, that's why we pair a lot of these parts together so you can get a nice night and day effect, and why I really enjoy having these bundles, because it's going to guarantee you some definite performance differences that you notice right out the gate. All right, so let's replicate this exactly. So we got them both oriented the same way. Going to pop this spring over here, and then we're going to pop the enhanced mag release in. I'm just going to compress these two legs, and that's going to allow me to drop out that little tool. I'm popping that spring out. All right, stay with me. Remember the leg that goes up? This is the one on the right side. These legs are the same length, so if you got them mixed up, it's not a big deal. You know, you could technically throw it in like this too. I mean, we're just trying to replicate exactly, so don't freak out though if you got it mixed up. What you're gonna do is get the spring in like this. So you got it situated, sitting on top now. Just rest it like that. Put your index finger on it and just push straight down and line up those coils with the holes on the mag release, and it's gonna be positioned just the way you want it. And another little trick here is to use one of your punches, 3/32 inch punch, slide it right in, grab that coil as an assist, and you're kind of stair-stepping up to that tool. So we're gonna push in, and then we're gonna slide that little tool in there. Use your table by all means. You don't need to have it in the air like this. Trying to slide that little guy in as I'm backing out my punch. Little handoff there. Kind of use your punch to steer it a little bit if you need to as well. You know, kind of a little bind point right here. So kind of push down the back edge of that coil, try to see where I'm at with that little assembly tool. There we go. So it's popped right in, it's captured. So that is much easier than trying to do this while it's in the pistol grip frame. Good to go. All right, you got that leg right there on the back side on the right, and it's resting up here on this front feature. And you got that other leg on the left kicked forward, exactly the way you want it. So now we'll just drop it right back on to that post right there. Do the same thing. You can compress that leg of the spring, and that's going to allow you to, you know, relax some of that tension and push right through. Kind of shimmy it on there. And then look through, make sure you're all lined up. All right, good. Make sure we're captured back here. Everything looks good. That leg on the right side, done. All right, simple enough. So we got the enhanced mag release installed. Now let's jump on over to polishing up the feed ramp real quick It's not required, but it's worth it. If you got 5-10 minutes, go ahead and do it. If you don't have the polishing kit, you could use any kind of polish for that matter. Flitz is the way to go, but you could use Mother's Mag polish. I see people throwing that out. I've never used it, so I'm not gonna say it works, but I see people all the time saying it does. Let's do a quick little polish and then we'll go ahead and throw this baby in. All right, let's go ahead and get set up here. So we got our polishing kit here. Works great. If you've already got some leftovers from a previous polishing kit, you're probably good. That, you know, half-ounce can of Flitz will go a long way. You know, the microfiber towel makes a good base. I will say, go ahead and clear off your workstation, or at least move a lot of the parts out of the way, because man, this stuff can go everywhere. You know, this Flitz is great, but you get it on that Dremel and it'll definitely go everywhere. So, good half-ounce can. You're covered for a little bit of time there. You can do quite a few jobs with that. And then our 4/16 stainless steel feed ramp. Now this little baby took some time to perfect, and I'm glad you guys hung in there with us, because it was at least a year ago that you guys were requesting this and saying, hey, you guys did one for the sub, why not for the PMR? Well, there's why. This is definitely a lot more complicated. A lot of time went into this, so it's great to see all the show of support. Already you guys are just snapping these things up. We're just trying to keep up and keep cranking them out, and so far so good, man. Everybody's loving them. You know, initially we did release it, had a little snag, and the issue was right here, man. You know, we were just slightly out of spec on that clearance, so it didn't quite fit in all of them, so we had to call them all back, and appreciate you guys hanging with us on that, but you know, no worries. All right, if you're seeing this video, it's already been worked out. We took care of everybody, made sure we got them a replacement. We actually shipped replacements before everybody even knew there was an issue. So it's how we like to operate, man. So we know a lot of you guys recommend us to all your buddies, and you know, obviously your buddies trust you, and you know, we don't want to betray that trust, and you trust us. So it's how we roll, man, keeping it real. So these gloves are good. It's not about really keeping your hands clean, it's more about having good grip on the part. These are tiny little parts, so we want to make sure we're not throwing it all over the place and damaging it, and we want to make sure we get everything polished up that obviously we intend to polish. All right, let's go ahead and change this bit out. Just loosen it up, slide it out, throw a new one in, get the standoff that you want, you know, at least halfway is good. Go ahead and tighten it right up. All right, so now I'll put a little bit of Flitz on the bit, try to saturate it and get it to absorb it. You know, anything that's just kind of laying on the top is definitely going to fly right off. So we want to make sure we get it saturated in there, and then on the part as well. And then we're good to go. I just run it full blast. When you feel it start getting hot, it's a good time to go ahead and just take a little quick second, wipe off all that grimy polish. You can start to see it already blinging through there. See, that was just one quick pass and it's already shining up. A good time to clean up your bit. You can take some of the Flitz, coat it in there, and just wipe that bit clean. Saturate the bit real good, and then we're gonna get a good amount of polish on the part. It's okay to get messy with it. And when you're running those high RPMs, it's gonna heat up fast. So that'll be your cue to go ahead and pause and wipe it on down, clean up, and set up for the next round. But you can see, man, that's already way better. That's awesome. Takes no time at all. You get it though. I mean, if we had to do that for, you know, a couple thousand feed ramps, that's just a lot of time, labor, added cost that we have to obviously pass on to you guys, and it just doesn't make any sense. I'll tell you what, I really enjoy polishing. I don't know why. It's so weird. I mean, I guess everybody's got their thing. People like to paint, draw, I don't know. I like polishing gun parts. Maybe because you can see that immediate result, and it's great. So definitely worth it. I always say that too, every time I do it. I don't know why, it's so weird. You know, the setup is what takes time. Setup and the cleanup, but this part is great. All right, we're good to go. 3 good passes. That was hardly any time at all. I'm gonna clean this up with some CLP. We're ready to put this baby in. That's already shining. That's blinging. So go as long as you want, but I mean, that's perfect. I mean, you got all those little tiny microscopic imperfections out of there. It's all smoothed out and just beautiful. That is ready to feed some bullets right there. Woo, that feels good. All right, so we'll just clean her up some CLP real good. Just get any of that excess polish off of there. I mean, no need to have any of that. Plus, we want to see how good a job we did. Use a Q-tip and a brush to get into some of those tight little spots. Ooh, look at that. That is worth it, man. Every little bit of it. Took no time at all, but look at that. Oh man, she shines up nice. Let's put this thing in. Let's get it all done. We can test the results. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and exchange a plastic feed ramp for a 416 stainless steel polished feed ramp, and this thing is just blinging. I cranked up the light intensity because I want you to be able to see right down in here, and it's a little tough to see otherwise, so bear with me, all right, camera pros. I always get a comment, man. I finally got the camera lighting down, and I screwed it up for myself, but you can see now, look at how this spring locates inside the slide stop, and then look at how you've got this half circle feature locating on this, basically this circle feature on the polymer where that trigger hinge pin locates into right there. You know, I'm just gonna set my finger down here just to kind of keep it from springing out, otherwise it definitely will. But you can see how that spring on the feed ramp is what sets the tension on your slide stop. So we want to replicate that exactly. And it's a simple, just straight drop in. And you'll see there is a little trick to it, which is why we have this universal installation tool. You can use it for anything really. I mean, it's super handy. Now for this, you just pull this little guy right out. All right, and that spring will just kind of come right out. So you'll just pop it out like that. All right, it'll snap you in the finger, good chance. And that's how it sits right there. So we replicated that, you know, with the stainless. Now we had to anchor ours in with a little tiny screw in there. You don't have to worry about that. It's all Loctited in, good to go. But you can see some major differences here with how it's set up, the geometry and everything else, not just a material improvement, but the curvature here. Here's my little spent casing, but the curvature is more conducive to feeding around. So previously you had this square, not really very good for feeding around like this is. You know, oh man, with that polishing, it's buttery smooth too. That feels great. All right, so let's put the plastic aside. Simple little drop in, same concept. You'll see there's this little square cutout. That's with this little square leg right here. So that drops right in. And you can just kind of throw it in, and it's gonna be a nice snug fit too, which is perfect. We're gonna back it out just a hair so that we can get that spring to locate in there, and that's the trick. Pulling back on it a little bit, just trying to create a little distance for myself. So I'm not completely seated in there. I've got a little gap down here, which is gonna give me clearance to move that spring around and drop it in. So you wanna make sure you get that spring to locate in that little tiny hole there on the slide stop before you seat in your feed ramp all the way. And this tool is super handy for doing just that. So I'm gonna grab that leg of the spring. I got my index finger there, kind of keeping it off of the frame because it's naturally gonna wanna seat in. And if I need more clearance, I just kind of push that feed ramp back a little bit. You know, I can drag that spring across that bar, but that's not the idea. You know, we're trying to give ourselves a little clearance, and we're trying to make sure we get it right in that hole. It's got that weird bend in it. All right, so I just felt it grab and drop right in. You can see that angle I'm at right now with that tool, and you can see this is why we have the tool. Not easy to do if you don't have something. All right, and there you go. I was gabbing along there. All right, so you want to make sure you do it one little sweeping motion. Once you got it in, press it down, let it lock and locate, and you're good to go. Oh man, looking sharp. I mean, I don't even know if I need to say anything about that. I think that pretty much sums it up right there. All right, man, that's rock solid. Thank you guys. You guys jumped all over this thing. I don't even know how many we got left around here, but that thing is awesome. So stainless steel feed ramps installed. We got our enhanced mag release installed. We are good for this left-hand side of the grip. We can set it aside. Now we need to go ahead and focus on the right-hand side of the grip. We're gonna place that trigger. I'll fix the light, and let's get further into this. All right, now let's go ahead and open up our KEL-TEC PMR-30, CMR-30, CP-33 flat trigger. This is the black option here. We've got them in red as well. Also includes your little 1.27 millimeter Allen key. Definitely a bizarre one, so happy we included that. Didn't make you look for that kind of size. Definitely off the wall. So this is needed for your pre-travel adjustment here and your over-travel adjustment back here. So what we're going to do, let's take care of this piece of it first. We're going to go ahead and back these out, put some Blue 242 Loctite on them, and then get them set up to where I think is a good starting point, and then if need be, we'll adjust it even further. Pretty sure I got it dialed in at least a general area where you're going to need to be to get started. So we'll back this little pre-travel adjustment out first. And you don't have to take it all the way out, you know, just enough to get a little dab on those threads. And if you go overboard like me, you just wipe it off. You probably get a little excess just like that too. Told you, man. I'm always overdoing it on glue, Loctite. All right, so for this part, the pre-travel, hopefully you can see, I've got 2 threads showing. And you want to make it just at about 2 threads. So, you see that? You barely count them there on the bottom. 1, 2. I see 2 little threads showing. All right, that's what we're shooting for. All right, because there is going to be a small amount of pre-travel required for the trigger to function properly. All right, so we'll do the same here. We're going to back it out until it's almost all the way out. A little dab of Loctite on there, just enough to keep those threads from backing out. All right, now here, I'm going to run it all the way in, just make sure I got that Loctite in there good. And I'm going to come back until I got 5 showing. So that's the goal. So we got 2 up front here for the pre-travel, 5 in the back for the over-travel. That should get us right where we need to be. Now this trigger was a lot more complicated than a lot of the other triggers we've done in the past, just given some of the geometry, you know, even over here, pre-travel, over-travel. A lot of these complexities add to the cost, unfortunately. So this one is priced a little higher than what I typically like us to be at. I try to get all of our parts where we can be, kind of that $30 sweet spot. I mean, for me, that's where I kind of like to stick when I'm shopping for parts, but unfortunately, this one demanded a little bit more, and I guess I get it. As we get into more and more complicated projects, that's the kind of thing that tends to happen. So we're gonna do a quick little swap here. All right, so let's just review this real quick. So you got our trigger bar right here. You can see that trigger return spring, how it's situated there. See this long leg comes off of that coil that's closest on the inside there, loops around and under that trigger bar. All right, so that's what engages the trigger bar, that feature right there. And then there's another little feature, probably barely see it. I'm gonna have to just back off that trigger a little bit so you can get a glimpse of it. But there's a straight leg resting right there on that pin, and it's supposed to be resting right there on that little feature on the side of the trigger. This one right here, see that flat? That's where that short straight leg's supposed to be resting. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and just pop this whole thing off, let you get a good look at it. And there's your trigger hinge pin right there. Hinge pin's gonna go, you know, bottom hole just like that, and that baby will drop right in. Now obviously we gotta put a few more pieces together there, but this is the concept here. You got your straight leg there that locates right on that little face, and then it winds around. You know, obviously it's all held in on the polymer grip there, but it winds around. You got that hook that extends and wraps under. So this was the view we were just looking at right here. You can see how it hooks under right there. And that little straight leg's supposed to sit on that face. So that's exactly what we're gonna replicate right now. So just pop off that plastic trigger. Don't need that. Put our 6061 aircraft grade aluminum, precision CNC machined, made in America, supporting a great company, great American jobs. Hey man, supporting our Second Amendment right here, pimping out our guns, making them run better. Easy. Simple as can be. That drops right in, smooth as butter. And you can see we replicated everything exactly the same. So we've got that spring, that long leg wrapping under the trigger bar. You can see our trigger bar here. Where's that little short leg? Right where it's supposed to be, on that little boss on this side of the trigger right here. Compress it right in, make sure it moves back and forth. All right, we're good to go. All right, so we got our trigger replaced, stainless steel feed ramp installed, and our enhanced mag release down here. All 3 installed. Now we just got to put this grip frame back together and then jump on over to the slide for the X-Power recoil spring. All right, so now we're going to put the 2 grip halves back together. So you're definitely going to have this little leg of the spring sticking out, so don't worry about that. We're going to put that back in last. Make sure your hammer spring is set. All right, hammers forward. We got our stainless steel feed ramp in place. We've got that spring located there in the slide stop. That side's good. We've got our trigger installed. We've got that trigger return spring set appropriately. We got good tension on that trigger. All right, and then we got our trigger bar here moving up and down. We're gonna have to push that down to provide clearance for that safety. So you can see how, you know, that'll be necessary here in a second. Granted, we're probably gonna have to pop this open again. We're gonna test our pre-travel, over-travel adjustment. Unfortunately, this is the only way to adjust it like this. So, and I know we tried to make sure that we could hide the screws as best we could. So there is a kind of a give and take there. All we have to do is line up this little peg on the feed ramp, this little square hole over here in the frame, and then you'll see this hinge pin right here is gonna locate right inside that little circular boss right there on the actual polymer frame, right there where that slide stop kind of sits and locates over that little boss right there. And then the pin down here for the hammer spring, we're gonna have to get that to locate as well. But those are really the three main points that need to locate. So we'll just kind of position it accordingly. You just slap it on there, really. All right, and then line everything up. So I'm gonna start with the feed ramp first. All right, so I can see that little square peg going in. All right, same with the trigger lined up good. And then back here, you'll notice typically this little piece doesn't really want to set in there correctly right away. And same with the hammer spring pin. Notoriously, that under tension doesn't really want to cooperate. So you can take your little micro tip, push it down just a little bit, and press it right in. So it might take a little finesse there. Just like that, it'll snap right in. And then right here, naturally, you know, you have to kind of maneuver it. Obviously, you have to make sure your trigger bar is pushed down so you can get it to slide in, and there you go. So we're pretty much good to go, minus our mag release spring. We need to make sure we push that all the way through. It doesn't hurt just to pop it, you know, apart just a little bit, and then all you have to do is tuck it right in, let it grab, and then close it back up. And then of course, this little pin right here where the mag release sits on, so you can throw a punch in there and use that to kind of center it up as you press down on the polymer. All right, at this point, everything is pretty much back together. We just need to throw the screws in there, and then we're done. Now for testing purposes only, take that long screw, throw it right in the center. Now remember what I said about over tightening, so just get it kind of hand tight. And I'm just saying this mainly for myself because I like to over tighten stuff. There you go, that took a lot of discipline right there. All right, and then this little baby screw back here, that's the shortest one you got. Throw that right in and just kind of snug it right up. Snug, not over tight. All right, and remember, we're gonna do Loctite on this screw, and this screw right here, and all the others are good. All right, so at this point, we can go ahead and test our pre-travel, over-travel, and see what it feels like. So if you got something to pull back on that hammer, lock it in place. You know, these T-handles are great because I can just use it as a rest as well, and let that hammer just strike that T-handle. You know, it's rubber coated. All right, so let's see what we got for pre-travel, over-travel. Ooh, that is good. I mean, the pre-travel's dialed in, and there was like nothing. So definitely don't go more than 2. Still got a little bit of over-travel there, so we can certainly adjust that. Let's take one more little pull and see where we're at. All right, so start to put some pressure on it. Yeah, that thing is dialed right in. So that might be a little too much pre-travel taken out of it. So I'm gonna back off the pre-travel just a hair because it is necessary to have a little bit. I mean, it is set up to where there is nothing. Okay, and I can see I need to come out at least 2 or 3 more threads on that over-travel there. This will be the last adjustment. That's really what you're gonna have to do. But at least you don't have to put it all back together just to figure that out. Long screw out, take your little 2mm here. Try to be a little gingerly with it. We don't have to go back and repeat all the steps. But it's not that bad if you had to. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Just make sure your hammer's forward, because you can see as you're separating, you know, where stuff's going to end up right away. So we want to keep that feed ramp over there with that slide stop bar. So I can see that already kind of happening where it's wanting to separate. So to avoid having to do all that over again, I'm going to just push it back. And as I'm pulling it off, I'm going to keep a finger on it there to help it stay in place, because I don't want to have to do that again if I don't have to. There we go. So feed ramp's still in place, mainly that spring in the slide stop there. I do have to reposition that little stop over top of that little boss. All right, so let's just address this trigger real quick. I'm just gonna pull it off. All right, so we're gonna back it out 3 or 2. So there's 1, 2, 3. All right, make sure we got that little flat leg there resting on that boss on that side of the trigger. And we're gonna get it right on that trigger hinge pin right there. Drop it right in. There we go. Make sure it seats nice and flush. The whole trigger bar should be sitting flush on that polymer there. Should move back and forth. All right, so before we throw it back together, you know, we're gonna be testing our pre-travel, over-travel adjustment, make sure it's right where we want it. Make sure you've got your slide stop in the correct position. And what I mean by that is this slide stop bar, this circle here, needs to sit on that little plastic boss right there. You can see how, when I say boss, it's like a raised feature on this plastic here. So that, you know, raised plastic feature, right? It's a locating piece there for this slide stop. So it sits and locates just like that. We're gonna check our spring to make sure that's obviously engaging and it's locating inside that slide stop bar. All right, our feed ramp is fully compressed there. Obviously our hammer spring is located on the pin. We've obviously got our spring right in the right position here on our enhanced mag release, and everything else looks good. Hammer's forward. All right, so left side's good. And then we're gonna take a quick look at the right side. You know, this trigger bar should move up and down. It should sit flat. You know, you can move it back, that trigger a little bit, and press down completely to make sure it's all the way 100% seated. All right, and you can see our trigger return spring is in the appropriate location there, which is perfect. All right, so we'll put it back together, and you know, when we do it this time, we're gonna do it a little bit easier way. So you see this pin that the hammer spring locates on, use that first. So go ahead and line that up, and then use the grip to more or less get it even with the rest of the frame. So we're gonna push down with the grip because it's under tension. This is the only one that can really cause you any issues. So we've kind of got a bite on it right now, and I'm pushing down with the other half of the grip, getting it all lined up nice and even there. You can see how it, you know, I can push down and straighten it all up, and that's going to allow me to easily pop it back together just like this, which is super helpful. You know, those little tips come along the way with doing this a million times. All right, and then trigger bar, we're going to push that down so that we can push the other piece of the grip together right here. And then we want to make sure, you know, those little lugs down there on the feed ramp are locating inside each little square cutout on the polymer grips. All right, and then obviously this trigger hinge pin, the silver one, is locating inside that boss, that raised portion on the grip on this side. And then it should snap together like this. You know, there shouldn't be anything that's keeping it separated. It'll naturally kind of be loose like that, but it shouldn't be split all the way down the middle. So if you see any kind of separation on the grip, there could be something that's causing interference, you know, and that's something worth investigating. But you know, as long as you go through those little checks, you should be just fine. Take your little micro tip, we're gonna push that little mag release spring all the way forward and to the right, and it's gonna drop and pop right into place. Now, this scenario happens quite a bit. All right, so we're gonna push down on the table as we center up that pin right there. So you can use 3/32 inch punch, kind of center it up and push down on your table, you know, simultaneously, and it'll seat right in there. It's a bit of a snug fit, so definitely don't be worried about compressing it a little bit. You can almost compress it a little bit more. All right, so the rest of it will pull together when we get the screw in there and start tightening it up. All right, and that's something we're gonna do now. So let's start with that center screw first. That's 2.5 millimeter. Remember, don't over tighten. Since it is the first screw, you know, that natural tendency to just crank it right down. All right, so back it off a little bit. Let's get the rest of the 2.5 millimeters in there. Got to show your self-discipline on that center screw there. All right, I'm gonna back this center one off a little bit. It's almost loose. You're really not cranking that down much at all. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and put some Loctite on these other little 2 millimeter screws. You only got 3 of them left. All right, so we'll throw some Loctite on there and just throw them right in. Put a little Loctite on there. You can clean off those threads too. It'll just help for the reassembly process. All right, go ahead and see if you're on safe or fire. Replicate that on the opposite side. These are all 2 millimeter, and they all get a little bit of Loctite, just like they did from the factory. there's a little feature on the safety. See how you got those little cutouts there? And you'll see, basically female end here and then the male end there. You see those two raised portions. They need to locate like that. And we are on fire on the opposite side. So we're replicating that. Snugging these two up. They don't need to be super tight. We got Loctite in there to make sure they stay in place. Especially this back one here. This one for sure, just like the center screw. They do not need to be very tight at all. All right, now for the mag release portion, just take your two 2mm Allen keys and just snug it up. You don't need to over tighten it, just until it's completely snug. It just needs to be snug, not crazy tight, because you still want to have, good mag release function there. So, all right, good. We're all pretty much set, ready to go here on the frame. Now we can move on over to the slide and we will be good to go. So you can see we got our stainless steel feed ramp installed. We got our new trigger installed. All right, we got our new enhanced mag release installed. And we can go ahead and just do a quick little check. We'll pull the hammer back and we will see how this trigger does. Oh yeah, that's perfect. So you're gonna need some pre-travel, over-travel for it to function. You're not gonna be able to get rid of every little bit of it. It's certainly worth testing it right now to make sure, it's functioning before we get any further. But I mean, that's spot on, man. That is nice. All right, good. So we're good to go there. For reassembly, you definitely wanna make sure this hammer's locked back, and we'll jump on over to the slide. All right, guys, so now we're gonna focus on the slide. So all we have to do is pull out the recoil spring here. We're gonna install our extra power recoil spring. So you just kind of pull back like that, and you'll pop it right out like this. You'll notice there's this little solid piece over here. That's what locates inside the takedown pin like that and keeps it in place. And then over here, you'll notice there's where you can compress it and remove that spring. There's a little piece of wire there. Really wish we could do an E-clip or something, but wasn't doable, so the wire it is. So we're gonna have to reuse that. Basically, all we're gonna do is set this up. Here's the buffer as well. It just kind of fell out, but the way the buffer goes in, and this is what we're talking about replacing, because you'll see it'll start to melt down here whenever you pull it out, a few hundred rounds from now. This one is new, so we don't have much to show here, but we should have something to show eventually. And if you guys want a better buffer that doesn't melt, let us know. I mean, we're definitely considering it, just from all the testing and melting we've experienced. All right, so there's your slide, pretty much ready to go back together here once we swap out these recoil springs. So take this little piece, the solid piece that locates in the takedown pin, drop it in your bench block, and then just pull down on the whole recoil spring assembly. You take your pliers, needle nose pliers, and just compress this little spring wire and just try to make a little space there. You're just trying to deform it a little bit so that you can get your micro tip under it and just pry it right off. And it'll just kind of bend out of the way. So, not a very quick process, but it's easy. It's just some wire bent around a post. Now take your time with it, because these could be fairly easy to lose, and this is something we're probably gonna start carrying just for that, predicament there. Once you got enough space and it looks like it's almost off, you can just kind of put your thumb over it and just pop it right up and off. Is what I'm shooting for here. All right, so I kind of got a little piece of it there. And I tell you what, if you guys, enough of you ask for it and you say, hey, why don't you just include that with the recoil spring? We'd all be much happier that way. Then we'll do it. Because I totally get your point right here. It'd be easier to just destroy this piece and just throw another piece of wire on there, since that's all it is. We could make it to where it's ready to be bent around. You just gotta set it up and then, bend it with your needle nose. But that's it right there. Kind of the most time-consuming part of it is getting that little piece of wire off of there. All right, set that down. So there's our recoil spring and guide rod, and this is the cap right there that sits on top. This cap has got a flat side on the bottom there, and it's got a little recessed side, with a raised portion here for that wire to sit into once it locks and locates on the tip here of the guide rod. So this is the retainer. This is the little piece of wire that holds it in place right here on the tip of the guide rod. and the factory recoil spring. We're going to replace that with the extra power recoil spring right now. All right, so you get the inner and outer replacement, you know, both springs combined. Definitely, man, this is a great addition here. I'm going to see if I can kind of give you a little bit of a demo. MCARBO springs here, factory springs here. So you can see a lot more flex in the factory spring there. So that factory spring is definitely a lot springier. So in this case, we want something a little stiffer, help control the cycling operations a little better. You know, it doesn't need to be so loose. So we slide both on just like that, and we're going to compress it. And we're put that little retainer on there, you know, the little flat side facing down, and that little raised portion facing up. And then we're going to throw on that mangled wire. It's not too bad. I mean, it's basically set up to go back on already. All right, then it kind of crushes together like that. I mean, it's just creating enough interference. I'm gonna try to crush it a little bit more. All right, good. The goal is to get it sit down inside that little recessed portion there, which it pretty much does at this point. I'm gonna try to perfect it a little bit more here. All right, there we go. All right, good. So it's sitting perfect in there now, right where we want it. So extra power recoil spring is installed, ready to go on the factory guide rod set up. So we're just going to drop it right back in. You know, this portion here that's one solid piece, this end here with the retainer that we just bent back on, that's going to go towards the tip of the barrel there. So you put that in first, get it to locate, and now you'll be able to compress it through the slide and get it to pop right in, just like that. So it pushes through at the end of the slide, drops right in, and we're done. All right, good. So now we can go ahead and just put it back together. So we got our slide here. We're just gonna put it right back on the frame. Watch the ejector right here. Just push it down, kind of lift up a little bit on that slide, push it back, and you wanna make sure that lug on the barrel lines up with the frame here. Drop in your takedown pin, locks in place. All right, good. We're all back together. So let's do a quick little function check. Oh, that feels way better. That's going to control that recoil, just going to keep the cycling operations running clean, which is awesome. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put in our dummy round or snap cap, or if you don't have that, you know, poor man's snap cap like I got here, you know, just a spent casing. Make sure it is a, you know, round that's been fired. I know, man, it goes without saying, but dude, in the world of CYA we live in. All right. So place it on safe, pull the trigger, nothing, good. Place it on fire, pull the trigger, up, dead trigger. Oh, he's over tight and stuff, man. I'm telling you, it kills me. All right, that didn't do it. Try these back here. Those feel plenty loose. I still got a dead trigger, so I'm gonna try this one right here. Oh yeah, that was pretty tight. So we're just thinking about the trigger bar linkage in here and what could be binding, you know, keeping it from actually dropping that hammer. All right, so we've gone through all the screws, and at this point we know for a fact it's not the screws. I mean, they are loose as can be. That's not the issue, but we still have a dead trigger. Nothing's happening. So the deal is, it's either the pre-travel adjustment up here or the over-travel adjustment here. And like I said early on, you've got to have some pre-travel and some over-travel, otherwise you run into this. So that is the scenario. You've got to take your little 1.27 millimeter, and you know, you can barely get it from here. Fortunately, there's not a whole lot of adjustment needed here on the pre-travel. Barely accessible, and we're only 2 threads showing through. Now you could tear it all down, and that would be a great way to go about it. I was able to make a slight adjustment on that pre-travel there. The next thing is this over-travel back here. You know, with this little Allen key, I can't quite make it fit in there. But if I take my needle nose pliers and I cut it down, well, I can make it fit. So you can see I cut it down quite a bit. Now you can grind that flat, you know, nice and clean, but we've got our little modified Allen key to fit in there. And you're only gonna use it, you know, for this intended purpose here anyway, so why not? And don't ask me why we don't just cut them that length before we ship them. I mean, that's, you know, this is all a little custom technique here if you get into this predicament. And this is a good demo. And now I can feel it. I can feel I've got tension on that trigger and it's engaging. So now we're gonna get somewhere. Boom. All right, so a little troubleshooting demo there at the end. Keep it held back. Listen for the reset. Good. All right. You should feel that reset. All right, let's go ahead and check one more time. See if I can throw that spent casing in there. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll pull the trigger. We'll leave it to the back, listen for the reset. All right, feels great. I mean, that feels awesome. Perfect. All right, and reset. So we're good to go now. Now we can go ahead and go back through our screws and just make sure, you know, we got them tight enough that they're not going to fall out. But that is kind of the troubleshooting process. So it's either the pre-travel, over-travel, or a combination of the screws. So at least it's a good, thorough, in-depth video on how to basically tear this whole thing down, troubleshoot it, and get it back up and running. Now the only thing we didn't demo here was a speed loader. I like a good excuse to do some shooting. We really got to get some 22 mag snap caps. There we go. Beautiful. She works. Solid. All right, guys, we're all done with the install. I want to make sure I had a chance to shoot. I mean, demonstrate the speed loader, of course. So we're going to go ahead and run some CCI Maxi Mag. It's a hollow point 22 mag. All right, we'll go ahead and jam this mag here. Demonstrate the speed loader. So it works for the PMR-30, CMR-30, CP-33. The nice thing about it, it's got that 45-degree angle cut in here with 245s on either side. Just does a really good job holding all the rounds down and keeping them separated, allowing you to jam in that next round. I mean, really a much better option than just jamming all 30 rounds by hand, trust me. Oh, it is possible to load an extra one, so you got to be careful. Definitely got to count real good. All right, so let's go ahead and run this mag through it and see how she does. All right, guys, so we got the PMR-30 all-in-one bundle installed. Includes the stainless steel feed ramp, the aluminum flat trigger, the enhanced mag release, and the extra power recoil spring. So should see all around improved function and performance. And I'm anticipating a much better shooting experience altogether, that wow factor. Woo! Hot brass down the shirt. Dude, that runs like a dream. That is nice. Feels fantastic. You know, really nice and stabilized, that extra power recoil spring. Having that little sweet spot down there in the flat trigger, you can really get a much higher rate of fire. That first out of the gate is what I noticed with this flat trigger once I shot it the first time. It is sweet. When you get your chance to put this flat trigger in, polish up that stainless steel feed ramp, really control the whole slide and cycling operation. And obviously the enhanced mag release does quite a bit, but you don't get to really experience it like the trigger or when you feel that recoil spring, but certainly significant in that you're not going to have those accidental mag drops, and it's going to seat higher up inside. All around winner. Really excited to hear what you guys think about it, and love that we were able to include a few other things in the bundle. Thank you guys for this ride with the PMR-30. It's been awesome, but there's still more to do. So interested to hear what you think about that buffer idea. I mean, I'm interested to hear if you guys have melted them in the past. So that's something that we're definitely seriously considering. All we need is an extra little push. So thank you, MCARBO Brother, for all your ideas and your support. Really appreciate you guys. And as always, happy shooting.